Hello, authors. I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short non-fiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. Hello, authors! I hope you're all keeping well in whatever part of the world you reside and listen to the podcast in. Today's interview is with writer, author, lecturer, ex-newspaper and TV journalist Robyne Young. And Robyne provides us with a deep reflection on making decisions to make things happen, both on a personal and professional level. So in my author adventure this week, it's been a busy week, not so much in my author business, but obviously in my personal life. The last day of school was upon us yesterday, and I realised that was the last day I had to get all my Christmas shopping done because the kids are now around for the next few weeks up until start of February. So I was crazy busy at the shops grabbing everything yesterday, but I am pleased that I managed to do it, so I feel quite organised there. At least I will next week. Usually we're last minute people, and trying to be better organised in all senses of my life. What has been happening in my author business is the print copy of Freelance Writing Quick Tips for Fast Success has been going back and forward with Ingram Spark, who I am printing through. The e-proofs, if you listened to last episode, I had approved a back to front proof that was rectified, but then there was 2 issues where the text on the front cover seemed displaced, which they fixed one. And then it took a couple of goes to actually get the other one fixed, but we got there in the end. And I just want to thank the support team for working so quickly and closely to get that rectified before the end of the year. So now I get to order a proof copy and hope, and I just hope, and I know this is it. This will be the final copy after so many copies, and I'll be ready to release it out into the world. And in January, I'll be doing a podcast episode solely on my printing, experience that I've gone through to help others if they're just first starting out in printing. Because as I said before, out of all the formats, digital is definitely my forte, but the printing is needed a lot of learning. So if you love the podcast or any of the episodes has helped you further in your author career, you can now pay it forward with Buy Me a Coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/thehybridauthor. Or you can leave me a review on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on to help other writers like you discover the podcast. Let's all support each other. Robyne Young has loved words since she was very small. After completing a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, Public Relations at Charles Sturt University, Robyne worked as a journalist in television, newspapers, and radio. Words and communication are at the heart of everything she does, whether that be corporate writing, non-fiction, essays, columns, fiction, and poetry, and the writing workshops she runs for people of all ages. Robyne also lectures in marketing, leadership, and organizational communication at Charles Sturt University and has 3 anthologies out in the world and has recently completed her first novel. Congratulations, Robyne. Welcome to the Hybrid Author podcast.
Thanks, Jo.
You've had a very wide and long career, it seems, and obviously loved words since you were very small. Is this how you got into writing in the first place?
My first poem I wrote when I was 7, and it was about mermaids and mermen, and I probably could recite it, but I won't.
You should.
Oh, I started to write, but I think about the writing and it's becoming a little bit more apparent, I think, as I get older and more interested in family history. My great grandfather, whose story has inspired the novel, he was Indigenous Fijian. So that's my dad's pop. And then on dad's mother's side, we have African American and Cherokee. So on that side of the family, I just think it's just like storytelling in my genes, that it's there. Dad used to write poetry. It all rhymed. If he got upset about things, I don't remember a lot of things that I wrote until I was probably in my teens. And then it was all of that really angst-ridden poetry and that first experience of a couple divorcing. So I like a babysit that for a couple. So I actually wrote a poem from that experience, with the little ones asking, like, where's daddy? I don't have it anymore. I think I left it at a former house, but it was these characters, these little lovies characters that were around in the 70s. Yeah, so, now, boy, I was really in love with, and I pictured him at the birth of our first child. And then did my uni degree, did a couple of units of creative writing, and then really didn't write in that creative form for many, many years. So I think busy with journalism. I was 30 and 2IC in a newsroom and two small children, and my ex-husband is a vet, and so busy practice. And in 1998, my mum got ill. She was diagnosed with cancer. It was that experience, and in the first collection, The Basket in the Briefcase, I remember the day really clearly, ringing in at TAFE. I was teaching in media at TAFE and just going, I can't come to work today. And by the end of that day, there were 3,000 words sitting there.
Wow.
But that was my first short story, like a proper short story. And it's little changed from what I wrote. And then it was like my antenna were out. Whatever I see, Kate Kennedy, who I'm an absolute fan of, and she's a great aficionado of the short story form. Kate always says that she trips over stories because, people always say, like, oh, where do you get your ideas? And I'm a bit like Kate, like trip over them. We'll see something and go, there's a story in that. And then it might actually percolate for quite some time. I'm a huge coffee fiend.
So you're not alone. You're not alone.
So quite often the idea will sit for quite some time before I get it out. So, and then I discovered I liked writing poetry as well. And then I discovered this thing called flash fiction. I actually had something published in Seizure Online when I was in Sydney, that year in Sydney in 2013. That gave me great opportunities. But one of my lecturers actually said to me, you're a poet. And I went, okay, so why am I writing all these words? So I've now pretty much had something published either self or in other publications for the last 20 or so years.
So you're a hybrid author.
I definitely am a hybrid author. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it sounds like, your start was obviously very natural from family. And I take it, was it your father? Did he used to read his poetry aloud to you?
Oh, not if we could help it.
Well, whatever capacity, and then you've taken that on and it found stories.
But I think we were a creative household as well. So I did ballet from the time I was 3 to 12. I wanted to play piano and had to make a choice, so then played piano. Pianos and teacups appear in a lot of my work. We could all sing. Except for Mum, who used to have to put up with like 5 different voices and radios and all sorts of things. So it was a household where, creativity was really, really encouraged.
Yeah. And it sounds like, you found stories in the everyday and through experience and almost cathartic, I suppose, trying to make sense of your surroundings as well, like what you were saying with your mum.
Very much so. And sometimes in the stories when people read them, and so Compression, which is one of my favourites, which is in The Only Constant, and somebody said, what was it like to have like a teenage son die? And I went, no, that didn't happen to me. But I saw this gesture between this mother and this child. My boy's quite grown up, but we're living a long way away. So I think for writers too, because there's always this thing like that, there's write what you know, but that doesn't mean always that you've been through that experience. It can be, and that's now becoming a really bit of a minefield where, somebody who's writing perhaps about kids on the spectrum and then they're getting asked different things. We're writing the novel where I've had a structural edit done on it, and the editor said, look, right up front, your claim to your Fijian heritage. Now, I also have an Indigenous character in it, and I have to because if I don't have a stockman in central New South Wales on a property in the 1870s, it's not true to the time. But I'm aiming to have someone read it. So, but I think English has always been like really easy for me. I was the kid that, won spelling competitions, and grammar comes very, very naturally to me. So sometimes when I'm marking student assignments, I keep going, it's about the marketing content, Robin. It's not about, what they're writing.
Yeah. And you're obviously a wide reader as well.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm reading a lot of Australian fiction at the moment and have for the last few years. And I've just started reviewing again for Newtown Review of Books. In my undergrad, so I did an English major, we were studying existentialism. So I turned 17 just before I went to uni. So in the November, I went to uni in the February. I'm reading like Kafka, and I'm reading Sartre, and I'm reading all this stuff and going, I should go back and read it now, because as a 17-year-old, I'm going like, who knows about existentialism? But I also did Women in Literature, which introduced me to a range of amazing women writers, Carson McCullers, Margaret Drabble, Edna O'Brien, and I did Australian literature as well. So I then came across that. So I'm actually having to find, though, because there are women writers who are just so amazing. I'm going like, really should be reading a few more of the blokes.
Yeah.
I really love men who can write women well. And I know some people have mixed feelings about Tim Winton, but I think he absolutely does. Robert Lukens, who I've known Robert through Twitter for years and years, and he took a long time to get his first novel published, but his first and second novels are just extraordinary.
Yeah, I've seen him actually at Perth Writers Festival, I think I've got one of his books on my shelf, actually, which could be the debut one.
Everlasting Sunday.
Yeah, it could be, actually. It's got like a wintry cover.
Yeah, it's sitting on my shelf behind me as well.
Yeah. yeah, he's lovely.
And Loveland was just incredible. That's his second. So the reading widely, and it's also to not just reading fiction, so really well-written memoir. So I've actually just finished running a series of workshops. And so week 1's very general introduction, week 2's short story, week 3 is memoir, and week 4 is poetry.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's great to be able to take examples of memoir to people that are essays that are maybe done through poetry, which is something I've been thinking about for myself, perhaps writing a memoir through places that I've lived, geography. It's a lot shorter than writing 85,000 words for a novel as well. I have gotten cracking on novel number 2. So.
Oh, well done. Well, it sounds like, you've written in a whole heap of formats, and obviously, like you said, you're a poet, and a lecturer, and widely studied as well. So today's topic is on making decisions to make things happen. And it sounds like, this could be your brand, because you have got so much behind you. Can you tell us, what does this statement mean to you? And how have you, with all these hats that you wear, how have you implemented it into your writing career? Is it just a case of, I want this, I'm going to go after it? But there's a decision in there in itself, I suppose.
There is. And I actually, it was really good to have a little bit of time to think about that, because some of the stuff that happens because it's out of your control, so you can't do anything about that. And the decision, say, to come to Albury wasn't mine. I didn't want to come here, and 34 years down the track, apart from 3 that I lived in Sydney, it's just the most amazing pond for someone like me. And I used to actually say that I could open a millinery shop. but everything that I do is related to words. That's the thing, because people sometimes go, oh, but you're doing this and you're doing that, and you just go, but it all comes back to communication. It all comes back to words. It's all about the ones that I choose. So there's a bit of decision making in there about which word goes in there, which I had to let go a bit writing the novel, because you can't always go back. Although I have sitting just above my desk this lovely quote from Anne Enright. I work the sentences in rhythm all the time. I can't move on from a bad sentence. It gets more and more painful, like leaving a child behind you on the road.
That's great.
I need to move on. But on to other decisions. When the first short story I had published, which is in an anthology called New Albury Writing. So that was in 2002. And so I had that. And then I was asked to submit something for an illustrated progressive novel. And then the person I submitted that to said, it's time you start to submit work. So the decision making I thought about for that is that you make a decision to get the story out of your head and to get it on paper, on the grid. I've started stories on serviettes in restaurants. Phones are fabulous, because you can actually start them in that. I can have a story, might be in 3 notebooks, because I've picked up a different notebook each time. So you make the decision to write the story. you make the decision then to finish it. And I now let things sit. Oh, well, no, probably not as long, because I have something being published next month. It percolated for months and months, and I wrote it in 2 days, and the deadline came, and I went, right, it's probably a bit undercooked, but I'm going to send it, and it's being published next month.
Fantastic. I think with that as well, like I find the more thought that you put into something before that, you actually sit down, the more understanding you've got, then you've got more to play with when you do make that decision to sit down and write. So even if you say, well, you maybe thought it wasn't perfected, but it was perfected probably in your mind beforehand.
And so then you make the decision to submit it, and then often you don't get feedback on those, and also to then the understanding, and this probably goes to another question about advice, is that it's so subjective. I've had stories I've submitted for a competition, it's done nothing, and yet it's in a literary anthology. So maybe it was a bit too highfalutin. No. Because I don't know. Because I think my story and my writing is really accessible. So that's in terms of stories. I also have a little ritual. I've always got some Prosecco's in the fridge. So when I submit something, I have a glass of bubbles.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Yeah, because a decision has been made to go that extra step. The anthologies, bringing those together, it's, like I've got all these stories, I've got a couple need finishing, serendipitously some little theme will come up. I have a lot of artist friends, musicians, visual artists, so they record. They make independent recordings, or they'll finish a series of work, hire a small space, and nobody says, and I'm glad this is really changing, I think, in the writing world, and nobody says to them, oh, that's a bit of a hard to be doing. Who do you think you are type of idea. So I guess it's that vision about confidence, but it's also to, what do they say, it takes 10,000 hours of practice. I'm not saying my writing's perfect, but I've done my 10,000 hours and more, and doing that, plus the feedback that I get, which is really lovely. And one of my students I just said he really loved the empathy in the work, which was a really, I take that as a great compliment. I take that as a really great compliment. One of the bigger decisions, like from a personal point of view, was leaving a marriage, but it was almost like I then found my feet as to who I am. And, it wasn't terrible. It was one of those things of just going, okay, this doesn't work anymore. We've created these two amazing boys, men. And then at the end of 2012, I was just on Facebook, and this ad popped up, and it said, Masters in Cultural and Creative Practice at Writing and Society, and then it said who the lecturers were, and one of them was Gail Jones, and Gail's still there, who hails from Western Australia originally, and I wish more people would read her, because I just think people think, oh, like, she's literary, but oh my God, like, her storytelling is incredible, absolutely incredible. And so she was the reason that I went, okay, I'm there. So, and to just some things I've been teaching at TAFE, and I've been lecturing at Charles Sturt, and to person in my life at the time he was moving to Sydney and arrived there. And so I'm in a group. I was the older person, so I was 54, I think. And I had some people though here that said, but like, you can write, why would you want to do that? And I said, because I want to learn more about my craft. I want to dig deeper. I want to, like, this is a story about this, but I want to, I think if you think about layering, you do get a richer story in another life. And I have a beautiful cross stitches on the wall. I did a lot of sewing and a lot of embroidery, and I think about writing like that you have this sort of blank canvas, if you like. Unpicking the stitches is a little easier on a laptop than it is, but that you start to build that base, and you layer, and I what's the right word? Discovered though that my way of working, it is quite organic part. It is really very, very intuitive. I mean, I actually remember I've been writing stories for years, and then somebody said, oh no, but this story arc, and I just went, oh, okay, right, okay. I'm supposed to have this and I'm supposed to have that, and you should only have X number of characters in a short story, and which is probably a good one. I've got a Christmas dinner one that, there are just too many people inhabiting the space.
Isn't it good sometimes as well to break that status quo kind of thing? Like, you should be this, it should be that. And sometimes the stories that do push the boundaries, I think, are some of the most incredible ones out there, that push through the rules.
one of the stories that's in single shots and has been in the Baranga anthology, The Secret, and that came from looking at an artwork by an Australian artist, Dick Watkins, and I just looked at this quite Picasso-looking image and went, oh, I can see like little babies and other things in there. But it was great to play with form for that one because it's third person, it's a letter, and then it's first person. So it just play. I just love to play. That year in Sydney, doing the masters, that yes, you had to do the work. Ivor Indick, who has Giramondo Publishing, was actually my supervisor, and I was terrified. I'm going mid-50s woman, terrified of, and I just went, it's fine. It's a person. He's just that was really good for building, I'm a really fairly confident person, but this was actually great. And then you write a script at Parramatta and arriving there and then going, okay, I'm going to submit this poem or I'm going to do this or do that. So doing that masters, I don't know what it did. Maybe, as I said, maybe it was a bit of a confidence boost because, I think you do need an amount of ego and put your work out there and then not be bothered about, well, we're always bothered about what people think about our work.
Yeah. But it's almost to say, I've put in the hours, I've learned the skills, I'm confident to be standing up here and telling you about it because I've done these things. And I'm very much the same. I feel like I have to have experience behind me to be able to talk about stuff,
Yeah, and it's always really interesting then when people say to you, like, where do the ideas, as we've talked about just briefly before, and where the ideas come from. But I think as writers, it's not latching onto the newest thing, because by the time you do that and then get the story finished and do all of that. So in publishing, just to talk about that for a moment, and that crime's really, really big. My novel's historical fiction, which I never really intended to write. But when I got to Sydney and I just went, I've always been really fascinated by John's story. So I've just used a seed, little boy orphaned, comes to Australia. The rest of the story is made up because then the family can't say, well, that's not right. And I go, it's not John. It's not John. So then, a decision to sell my house, which then gave me the wherewithal to travel to Levuka, which is where Moonchild starts out, and gave me freedom. And of course, rental situations, we're probably a bit more fortunate in a large regional town. Well, I was fortunate to find somewhere nearly 5 years ago that, I think I'll be here for quite a while. But you can sit and go, like, I keep throwing money at a house and then trying to no, this is what's really, really important to me. And this is going to give me the wherewithal. I'm really fortunate, and I say yes to most of the work that Charles Sturt sends to me, because then that gives me the financial wherewithal to go to, I'll say it correctly for any Victorian listeners, Castlemaine a few days. Or, I've written in cabins and different things. So that creating space, making decisions to create space. And I know that that's not easy when people they have families and they have, lots of other things going on. And it's interesting to listen to people like Alice Pung. Now, I've known Alice about 15 years or so, and she now has 3 little people. And as she said, she doesn't have the luxury of sitting down for hours. She has a notebook in the car for drop off, pick up, snatching that time, I think. And I went to a Stephanie Dowrick workshop many years ago, which was about sustaining your creativity. And Stephanie talked about paying attention to what you need. And it's, it's not being selfish. I don't think so. And I know everybody's personal circumstances are very, very different. I mean, I read a lot when my boys were growing up, and there was like this unwritten rule in the house, which was if mum's within 100 pages of finishing a book, there's a big do not disturb sign above their head. Go play outside. And I guess to that, it wasn't seen as an indulgence. It was just like, oh, this is actually what mum does. And now it's with the grandies. They live a little way away. Well, they live in Katherine in the Northern Territory. But this acknowledgement of this is actually what I do. This is actually who I am. I had a dear aunt's funeral in Sydney. One of my cousin's children, he introduced me to her, and Carissa said, oh, you're the writer. Wow. Like that to me was such a lovely affirmation, because that's sort of who, apart from being, friend, lover, nanny row, all of those people, it's really who I am and what I do.
No, that's fantastic. And so one of the decisions as well, making a decision when you were writing the anthologies to independently publish, how did you make that decision? Because that's really, in my opinion, independently publishing, making a decision to do that is making things happen really, while, you might be waiting for a traditional deal.
Yeah, I think because short stories are very, very hard to get published for a start. And it's interesting that the experiences that you have and how they feed into your confidence to do something. So many moons ago, I worked on a country newspaper. So I learned all about layout. I learnt about even, albeit like, I think we were still using manual typewriters back then. But anyway, I was the 2IC in a newsroom at Prime News. The boys were 2 and 5. That was another really big decision. I decided to leave and everybody went, but you've got this great job. Like, why would you want to do that? And so I think I was nearly 32 or so at that stage. I wanted to have time at home with the younger one. I've been home with the older one. And then I decided actually to start my own company as well. So I did that in 93. So Promotions from the Pen is 30 years old next year. Because I saw people who had small businesses and they were getting advertising, people coming and knocking on their door and going, oh, we'll give you this great package and this sort of stuff. So I had a tiny, tiny little ad that said in the yellow pages, which said realistically priced promotion advice and action. But when I left Prime, I booked myself in to do a 2-day page maker course. I could learn about desktop publishing. So that last collection I did all of the layout and the setup in InDesign. So I now know how to do separate files. You don't import the whole thing into one big file to start with. Do that. YouTube going on one side and in one computer and like showing me how to do it. And I mentioned before about having artist friends and musician friends and actually and theatre friends too, who develop work and just hire a space and go, right, like this is what I do. And it was a bit like, gathering them up so that I could do something with them. So the basket and the briefcase, which is my first one, I had a local printer who did that. As I said just before we started recording, I mean, I'd go through it and take all those $6 ellipses out. With the only constant, and that was just the thing of going, oh, I have these stories. I've got a couple I really should finish. Yeah, so it's about that they all have a bit of a base of stories that have been published. And then with the last one, I'm a member of Baranga Writers, and we may get to a question about advice alone. I've been giving a bit of that along the way. So joining Baranga Writers in Wagga, now that's been incredible because I look at some of the people I'm in anthologies with and just go, oh my gosh, like Van Adam and people like that who are in those anthologies. And after COVID, New South Wales government had a grant, all these micro grants, and they emailed all the members and said, do you have a project? And I just thought, yes, I think I've got a project. I want to do something that's a bit fun. And so I have the little 80-word microfictions that run through the anthology with one character. It's about doing something just a bit different. Michelle de Kretzer was actually just here in Albury in September, and her new novel is sort of 2 novels in one, and you can start with one or the other. And I loved when she talked about she'd done other things and she just wanted to play. She just wanted to see how that went. So I mean, financially too, I sometimes think I just have a little money fairies that sort of go, yes, we can give you this big chunk of work, that can make the things happen. So I guess it's about those decisions about prioritizing. And again, like, I live mostly on my own, so the decisions I make about what I eat, what I spend money on, that type of books are mine.
Yeah.
Dymocks just actually deposited the money from sales of the book in the local Dymocks, and I've just looked at it and gone, I think I've spent at least twice that. But that's have to read. They've not had huge distribution because I've not looked at that. They've been a bit more for a local market, which I'm really fortunate. Because I've had very high profile jobs, as my boys used to get very annoyed when we go grocery shopping and they go like, Mum, everybody.
Yeah.
Whereas with the novel, which depending on the outcome of a couple of things in the next few weeks, I'm probably 80% at the yes, I will self-publish. I will, and I've booked it in for a copy edit. So again, it's about making it the best I can make it.
What was the decision? And sorry if you mentioned this before, but I don't think you have, between the decision from, say, writing a lot of shorter works even to then write a full-length novel. Is it just the content is of what, you know, Moonchild is
Um,
longer form?
So Moonchild was my master's project, but it was a 9,500 word, so long short story. So our major project only had to be about 15,000 words. So long short story, and then of course exegesis about, you know, why you're writing, what you're writing. And we had, during that year, we had these different units that we did. So I was able to play a little bit with story structure. So one of them that we did was around the world. And so then it was the idea that to see the similarity, to see the difference in things, you need to see the similarities. So I had a 9,500 word, beautiful, you know, work when Gail Jones says that your work's very like filmic, and she likes the register of tenderness in it and all of those things, and gives you a meritorious grading. You think, oh, I think I know what I'm doing. So then it sat for a long time because I didn't know what to do with. Do I add things in like pleats, back to our sewing metaphors? Do I write the whole thing again? Do I do that again? Like it's just, and I know that this happens to other people, there's just something, you know, the penny drops. It's just this, and I went, okay, actually I just go to the beginning with it. As I said, I had the opportunity to go to Levuka, which was amazing because my first iteration had white sandy beaches. There are no white sandy beaches, it's all little volcanic pebble over there. Then I had the chance to walk the streets that my great-grandfather had walked. So all of that then adds to it. So basically then I built up more of the Fijian part, and then characters that you brought in. So this is the thing about working with a longer work. I thought I'd get it to novella length, and then thought, oh, that's going to be really easy to publish too. And then I'm actually quite astonished that I've actually managed to write like an 85,000 word novel.
Yeah.
But I think I gained more confidence with it. But I did let the story sort of go. But back in 2017, I put it in for the Ritual Prize, and you had to do a chapter by chapter synopsis.
Right.
So then that gave me the framework, because I don't plan my short stories. I start with a word and I end up with 2,000 or 3,000, depending sometimes on competition length. So I did that, and that really helped. So it didn't mean I stuck completely to that, but it gave it that. And then there were different scenes started to come in as I got to know the characters better. I have the Indigenous stockman's wife, Maddie. Now, I brought her in to do a particular thing in a particular scene. And do you think she was ready to leave? No. And I really love the relationship that develops between the two, the adoptive mother. But basically the story is, you know, I just take these characters and I geographically and emotionally isolate them out on this farm. And then the funny thing during COVID, when I'm going through, like in Bridget, kneading dough, you know, what's everybody at home doing? Baking. Yep. But it starts off with the story of an epidemic as well, which basically came in by ship to there, and a third of the population of Overlau, which is a small island where Levuka is located and was the original capital, had died. So 450 of 1,500 inhabitants. So the fact that my great-grandfather survived that, I don't know a lot about his real, I mean, I do know some about his real life, but in terms of his adoptive parents and how he ended up doing the things that he ended up doing. So it just, you know, just grew. And when I read through it and I go, like, it doesn't have a lot of padding, you know, I'm a fairly economic writer. Sometimes, though, you know, people say, like, you just got to put a bit more in there. You know, I like to leave space for the reader, but sometimes too much space. So that process, I had an opportunity to submit it to a publisher back in 2020, just from a conversation at Right Around the Murray. And this is the other thing, make a decision to do the elevator pitch.
Yes.
If a publisher says to you and you're chatting and says, what's the story about? Have that ready. Yeah. Have that ready. And then I got an email in early 2020 that said, we're all reading submissions, because she said, submit your first 3 chapters. And I said, no, we're nearly finished. I mean, I think I had 20,000 words at that point. So I got an email in the late March, April, do you have a finished novel? I said no, but I did have by the end of June. And then I worked on it for a couple of months. And again, look, it wasn't ready, but I was, and that maybe wasn't the right decision to make to send to her at that time, because I think I just went, I have this opportunity, I need to take it.
Yeah.
However, her feedback led me to have a structural edit on it. And then I've worked through that, and then it's sat for a while, which you need to do. And then trusted readers Stephen King talks about having trusted readers. And so they're the people who aren't going to say to you, oh, like, this is really good when it's not.
Yep.
You know, but I've had somebody read it and he said, I don't remember that rocking horse going off the veranda. My God. So he did a really, really close read.
Yeah.
So that prose, I have the confidence now. There's a novel I'm starting to work on, which is all set here in Albury. It'll cover about 30 years, whereas the Fijian, this other one covers about 8 years. And it works a bit differently with time, with short time jumps a little bit in the first part, and it stretches out in the second part. So the first part covers like 7 years. The second part's only about 10 months. But I'm really interested in looking at large regional cities or large regional towns, and as they grow and change in their quest for sophistication, what do they gain, what do they lose? So that 2-line pitch to that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it sounds like, even though, you know, you've made a decision to make one thing happen by sending it on, you know, for someone to read, something else came of that decision, which wasn't what you originally intended. So even when, I guess, we make decisions to make certain things happen, it's not always that certain thing that happens, but something else that comes of it. Like you said, you got the structural format or edit from doing that, from sending it out. So
yeah. So and again, you know, the money fairies gave me a job as a research assistant on a COVID-19 project, which then gave me the wherewithal to do that through a couple of binder of Australian writers. Through that, I was introduced to Trisha Dearborn, who did that, and she will do my copy edit for me as well. And I think that that's the thing, is that it's making it so, you know, if I do self-publish it, and then that's the thing too, I'm a Scorpion, I'm a naturally very impatient person.
Me too.
Dialing back and taking those breaths has been something that I've really learned. And again, I spoke before about my mum's illness. It's like that and her passing in 2001 when she was only 62. It just taught me so much. One of the things about and you might come back to that advice I was mentioning about, so join your writers group, have a really good group of trusted readers. Sometimes that's easier to do than not, but the person, and so I've had people reading it in both, you know, early, and, you know, somebody who read it and it's the first iteration went, but I love that windy sort of way that it did, and that it wasn't quite so linear. And doing that, or a friend's 90-year-old mum who's read both versions and couldn't read the last few pages because she was so frightened, and I thought, I hope I've built enough trust in the reader that they'll go, like, it's going to be okay without spoilers. So doing that, but joining the Australian Society of Authors, because that's the opportunity then, like, to have done the virtual literary speed dating.
Yeah, that's it. And you mentioned oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, but making the decision to do that. Yeah. And just going, okay, you know, well, what have I got to lose apart from whatever it cost us to do that? ASA too, if I decide to self-publish, I'm looking at perhaps using the distribution decisions to use your networks. You know, I spoke about Alice Poon before, and Alice had actually written a letter of support for me for a fellowship I'd applied for. So I got in touch with her and I said, you know, all those lovely words you put in there, can I put some of those on my cover?
Why not?
Yeah, so it's about not being afraid. It's about being supportive, I think, and that's, you know, we were just quite, you know, having a little chat about Twitter before. I've met many of the authors I know through there, you know, and just not being afraid. I think.
What about like you've sort of spoke on fear before, and confidence and things like that. So people who, you know, and especially in writing, we get rejected by publishers often, sometimes for lots of different work, and, you know, there's personal fears and adversity and stuff for putting ourselves out there. How have you made these decisions to make things happen when you've had those feelings of fearfulness about how things might be perceived? Or, I mean, even like you're saying with the death of your mum, is it sort of like, you know, this has happened, life is short, I'm going to do this regardless of how I fear. I've got to put myself forward. You've just got to do it.
And it's interesting because sometimes a response from people can be really interesting, because that was quite a personal story. So the first collection is really bookended. And so it's a fictional character, Sarah. She's quite young and she doesn't have children. But as I said, writing that first short story, because I just rang in and said, I can't come to work today. And that was that. I actually printed off a copy for Mum when she was still alive, and she had it with her. She was having some treatment. Somebody there said, "Oh, can we get it and photocopy it?" And Mum, thank you, Mum. And she said, "No, like this is my daughter's work, and this is actually for me. This is not to be shared." Well, it was later because I think she wanted it to be. I don't know. I always used to worry about what people thought. I probably still do. I remember going to a writers sort of group here not long after I arrived, and just thought, oh, these people are so serious. Because I have my serious and my quieter moments, but I find such joy. And that was I talked about Gail Jones before, yes, and I'm an absolute, fangirl of hers. That was one of the things she talked about. She talked about that joy of writing, because to be honest, if I didn't enjoy doing this, I would not do it.
That's right.
I would find something else to do. I might learn to paint. That's something I've not done yet, but I also love sharing that joy. And I love that sense when somebody comes to a workshop and because somebody's told them when they were 6, or put red marks all over things. Red pens should be absolutely banned. That they can't write, and yet everybody can. It doesn't matter if it's just a couple of words on a page. It's that. And the publishing, that's not something that I set out to do. I write because it helps me to make sense of the world. That's what I do. I write because I love to play, and that's the form I love to play in. And yes, I'm going to write a play one day as well.
Wow.
I've had an idea for one for quite a while. Yeah, look, I think it's about not worrying about. There's a great a saying that I've that says, "What anybody thinks of you is none of your business."
Yeah, I love that. It's true.
So it is this type of thing. And I've made decisions. So as I said, like leaving a marriage and doing that, but just going, I absolutely know everybody's going to be okay, but this is actually what needs to happen. And, mostly it's worked out really well, touching lots of wood and going, hey, fairies, where are you? But I think it's also too about, don't want to sound immodest, but I think it's about having a generosity of spirit. So you can make a decision about that too, that you can actually see friends who are, perhaps winning awards or getting their work published, in a whole lot of journals, and just go, no, well, I'm a bit on my own path. And look, I've probably been that way. My parents used to tell a story about my first ballet concert when I was 3. I got out of line in the line, and I apparently went to the front of the stage and poked my tongue out.
That's fab.
That's sort of a bit, and I have a beautiful photo that a cousin returned to me, and it's a year later when I'm in my tutu and my little ballet slippers, which I still have. And Mum and Dad had used it like a Christmas card, and they'd written on the back and said, this was taken before the end of your Christmas concert. Robyne did a solo in front of 200 people.
Wow.
I just turned 4. So look, I've been showing off since 1961. Look, it's partly, I think it's in my nature. And then I talked before about the storytelling, that lineage of storytelling. That's also a lineage of resilience. That's, people moved from the African continent to North America. Then my great-great-grandfather marries a woman, he's my great-great-great, marries a woman who's Cherokee, who then moved off their lands. So the Trail of Tears, and great-grandfather on the other side comes through what they call the Underground Railway. And that's not a novel I'll be writing, because my cousin has put a really amazing history together, not as non-fiction. In a split decision, he and his mate decide not to stay and go to goldfields in the US, in California. They hop on a ship and they come to Australia. So I just think that it's something with heritage and on that side of the family. My mother was one of 11 children.
Wow.
Went back to school, finished her nursing training, did her midwifery and all of those things. So she was 38. She was just 20 when she had me. So I think it's that part of it is, it's just the way I'm made. Now, that doesn't mean I don't sit and quiver in the corner.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that every few months I go like, who do you think you are? But I think it's just decide what's important for you. And it's like, if it's pottering with writing and that's how you want to do it, that's great. And I'm at a different stage of my life. I basically have no responsibilities, to my students, so that, I teach them well. And the uni has lots of checkpoints, so
Yeah.
you can't get away with things. Just back yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, but also to surround yourself with people who they don't have to be really like you in the way that, your disposition and things. But I have an amazing cheer squad. I have friends, and my friend who launched the last collection for me in April, I'm standing there going, oh, that's me. Or poet Emily Zoe Baker, who actually launched my second collection, and like she's going through that collection of stories and talking about it, just going, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
Look, it probably has to be to show off your kids. I don't know.
But I suppose, like what you're saying, it's fine if you make the decision to keep your writing to yourself and just play. But if you decide that you want to put it out there, then I suppose you have to make that decision to, if you're not someone like yourself, like you said, you like to put yourself out there. But if you're not someone who does that, but you want to share your work, you have to make that decision to take steps to be able to do that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about finding the group that it's more than about the essence of the story, that it's not about where that full stop and where that can come later, like that the punctuation and those things. And getting the story down. And there's a great Nora Roberts quote, which is that you can fix a bad page, but you can't fix a blank page. Which came to me via Kate Kennedy. So Kate's been quite an influence. Yeah, but it is about having that support network and, write something, submit it. Fortunately, lots of competitions only have very, very small entry fees, because that's another thing that financially it can be hard to do that stuff. I'm relying on a very big tax return to do what I do. Otherwise, but I'm thinking about, crowdfunding with the novel that when it's ready to go, people buy one and that can pay for the printing. And you were talking before about just that those practical aspects. And it's just that I have their skills I've picked up along the way, and to the technology. I started off in journalism, film and manual typewriters, these great clunky things that you put 6 pieces of carbon paper in and the whole lot. And now to be able to produce like the last anthology, set it up in InDesign, just be really careful about people sometimes in that what they call hybrid publishing, whereas I funded that, but I've used a print on demand group in Melbourne who are amazing. I've done 2 collections now with them, who are just incredible to deal with, and will keep sending you proofs until you're absolutely...
Yeah, no, that's amazing. You've already shared so many tips along the way, find people who can encourage you and all sorts of stuff. Do you have any more tips for authors looking, who are sitting there and they want to make things happen, but they maybe don't know how? Or
I know, look, just do it's a bit cliche, and my mother was saying just do it long before that company. Look, I think it is that. And a couple of just like wrapping up, make space and time, even if that is sitting in the car waiting for kids to play sport, doing that. I think it's partly too about your family understanding. I think my ex-husband used to think, oh, that's a nice sort of hobby.
Yeah.
Not, this is actually really integral. That's another thing that's in lots of my books. There's lots mums, babies, cups of tea. More blokes though, a few more blokes. And I just think if it's important to you, and if it's really, really integral, like to who you is on the other side of the border.
Yeah.
But that constancy, I think, is the thing, especially with the longer work.
Yep.
Chuck everything in. Don't show it, and not showing your work too early. Yeah. It's just backing yourself. I think it's just, and find your cheer squad. Find the group that they understand how important that is to you, because a lot of people don't get writers and artists and theatre makers and and I've also worked in jobs like with Regional Arts New South Wales. Find your tribe.
No, that's all absolutely spot on, and incredible advice there as well. And obviously, you've independently published your anthologies, and you're currently seeking traditional representation for Moonchild, but you're saying that you might to go down the independent path. We'll see what happens. So being hybrid, well, you are, because you've had other things published and stuff. Is there any screaming advice you wanted to share with anyone who is trying to publish in those aspects?
I think because I've had now a number of rejections, and that we're supposed to like wear those
Yeah, well, that you're
It's
saying
hard.
you pop up in the prosecco when you send it out. You should pop up. I've heard some people pop up in champagne when they get the rejection, because it shows them that they put themselves out there and they tried.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly. So I mean, I would love that somebody picks Moonchild up, and I have come like really, really close. But it's also that's another thing. Get to know, learn as much about the publishing industry as you can. And then in the self-publishing realm, learn about that too, because I think that there are groups of people out there who want to try to make money out of people. And that's why joining the Australian Society of Authors, it's whatever it is for the year, and it's just and then they have like a contract one. So she says hoping to get a contract for somebody to look at. Although I've had to do grant acquittals and I've had to do that sort of stuff. And look, I just think that make it the best it can be, because the publishing industry now, as you probably will know, Jo, they don't have time to do the hand holding that the perhaps once did. Once somebody could have actually sent something in that perhaps was full of grammatical errors, or the story was really strong, and then they could work with those people. Also too, I know I've been edited, so in a few times, so that's a really good thing, because then you go, okay, no, I really want to keep that in. So even just a short story is being published next month. So a couple of things are going like, oh, is this really necessary? And then you go, oh yeah, like I really, really, really want that left in. Learn about the industry. Learn about the industry from reputable people. For any like the women listeners, you've got something like Binders that can be a good space. I just had some really good information about insurance, because I have a home-based business. So like it goes, I have a business that runs as well, so that's perhaps slightly different. But learn as much as you can.
And be cautious, and
be cautious, but also understand that it can take time. Like I've decided I've got another 30 years left. So, how many novels is that?
That's a fair few. It's a fair few.
But I think it's about, and I know I've said this now several times, it's really like, if this is what is really, really important to you, then those people who are around you and who care for you and who get you, they're, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Robyne. You have shared so much, and your story's just been absolutely beautiful. Can you please tell us where, tell our listeners, where can they find your anthologies, your workshops, everything Robyne Young?
So at Robyne Young's, and it's Robyne. So Robyne Young, ROBYNEYOUNG.com.au. And that's my lovely new website I had built this year. So again, that's another decision I made. And you can actually buy copies of the 2 anthologies. And workshops, I haven't looked at the online space yet, but local people anywhere in Northeast Victoria or Southern New South Wales. But yeah, and the aim, because then I'll do a lovely...
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Robyne, for sharing your time with us. That was amazing.
Oh, no, thanks for the opportunity, Jo.
So there you have it, folks. Robyne Young and making decisions to make things happen. I hope the episode has brought you to consider the decisions you've made, past and present, and the ones you hope to make to move yourself forward, both in your personal and professional life. Some people find it hard to make decisions. I know I sort of have in the past, but, once you make them, you stand by them. Next time on the Hybrid Author Podcast, we only have 2 episodes left of 2022, and we have the final roundup of guests in a Merry Christmas mashup. That's it from me. I wish you well in your author adventure this next week. It's bye for now. That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.